find, free, and follow, right? So you find your intuition, you tap in, and then you free your mind of those like fears, the limitations, the frustrations, the insecurities. So, and although it's free, you're never going to be fully free of fear, right? Like it's a part of who we are. It's coming to peace with that part and learning to move through the fear and the limitations, right? And then follow is when you actually do that leap of faith. You actually have the courage to follow it. And like you said, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to abandon yourself, and it can be baby steps. You do this in small, start with small things that you feel ready to do, and then gradually move to the bigger things if you need to.
Hello, Thrivers. Welcome back to season 3 with Thrive with Sharon podcast. I am so excited that you're here, and I'm excited that you keep tuning in. And if you are now just finding this podcast, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button and leave a little review and let us know what you think of this conversation. Today, we continue to just spiral out from our established communities and find more incredible people doing amazing things in the world. And recently, Samantha Joy, one of our mutual friends, introduced me to Cara. Cara Kelley is an accomplished speaker. She's an author and the founder of the Kelley Effect, a growing learning and development company with a passion for empowering individuals to reach their full potential. And Cara has dedicated over a decade of helping people overcome challenges, embrace their authenticity, and achieve personal and professional success. Starting as the youngest international trainer for an education program in Australia, she has since traveled extensively and lived in multiple countries, gaining valuable heights and experiences that now she shares with her audiences. The thing that I love the most about this human being is that she has a global lens. And I cannot tell you how important it is for us to really widen our lens and to open up and be curious and embrace things that are outside of our own norms, our own cultural norms, as well as our own societal norms and familial norms. So I can't wait to dive into this discussion. But Cara, her journey has gone from being very indecisive and people pleasing, and she was a middle school teacher and probably very much like followed the treadmill of life and the way that things are structured and set out for us to follow. And then she did a pivot and she became a bold, unapologetic speaker. And she is now facilitating things on the basis of her own inspirational talks. And she's now touching people worldwide. So Cara, I'm so excited to have you here today and to join me in this discussion about all of the amazing things that you've done in your life and your journey. Welcome.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm so excited to be here. I really am. And I know that we're very aligned. So I can't wait to see where this conversation goes.
Yeah, in our pre-chat, I try not to pre-chat too much. That's such a challenge for me because I like to talk. And I love to get to know people. And so one of the things that we just kind of discovered is how we are so aligned with this deprogramming, let's just say, this deconstruct of this way of being, especially as I identify as a woman, you identify as a woman, right? So for women who have kind of been placed in these like very dichotomous roles, right? Where on the one hand, we're being groomed to be powerful and get these positions where we're helping to serve people and reach these great heights professionally. But at the same time, we're not really being given the energetic as well as literal, even in equal seating as other people. And so some of the ways that we find ourselves finding success is through shrinking who we are and diminishing who we are. So I'd love to hear more about that part of your journey and, where you were at before you made the pivot.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I often talk about the tall poppy syndrome. I think you commented on something about that I made on Instagram. But yeah, as a tall poppy, right, we as women, like you said, we're encouraged, and we're kind of, it's this new age like pushing us down that path, but then you find yourself on that path and people are left, right, and center trying to pull you down.
Mhm.
And that's something that I think more so once I became an entrepreneur, I really struggled with, because I started to see who really were the people that were gonna support me and cheer me on and not backstab me, you know? And it
Mm.
is, I think, important to surround yourself with other people that are on that same, like a similar journey. And that's where I met Sam. I'm really grateful for her, because we've been on this journey together. And prior to that, I was doing fairly well in my career as a teacher, and then helping pioneer this education program. And there were moments of the tall poppy syndrome where people were trying to, come in and cut me down and be condescending and whatnot. But I was fairly lucky with that piece of my journey. But it wasn't until I stepped out and moved countries that I really started to explore who I truly was. And that was the piece for me, because I felt like even when I was in my teaching career, I was being all the things that everyone else wanted me to be. And I was,
Mhm.
everyone could accept that and saw it as like, as admirable what I was doing. But then once I really stepped out and started following my truth, my intuition, that was
Mhm.
when it, I think it was it began that kind of scary journey for me, because it was so, it wasn't rooted in logic. And that was what I had
Yeah.
taught, how I had been taught to live my life, was very
Evidential.
logical.
Yes.
Yes.
Evidential decision making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's, oh, I totally understand that. I too, went through that as well.
Mm.
Um, I'm wondering what was underneath that drove you into that.
Oh, I 100% went, because I'm from a really small town. Well, it's not really small, but it felt like a really small town, they have the small talk and all the rest. And it felt like a very small town that I just had to get out of. I knew I
Mhm.
needed to break free from that. And not because there was anything wrong with the town, but
Yeah.
exactly what you were talking about in the beginning. And I very intentionally was saying, I need to get out of my comfort zone. I want to go and be challenged and all the rest. And I actually moved to Scotland because my mom was born there and I had family there and I had a passport. And although it's kind of ironic, because I wanted to be challenged and I was doing the most logical thing. I
Yeah.
took the move I made was very safe and very
Yeah.
logical,
Yeah.
but and that's where I really was like, what am I doing? Why am I here? And, I felt like I was making
Mm.
a difference in kids' lives before I made that move. And so then I was all of a sudden in Scotland working in a bar, like, what am I doing with my life? What just happened? So, yeah, I
Oh
think,
my God.
below the surface, there was a piece of me that knew there was more. There was a piece of me that
Yeah.
knew, like, that little girl in me just wanted to spread her wings and truly fly, but I didn't know what that meant
Mm.
until I left.
Oh my gosh. How old were you when you did that?
So I was 25 when I did that.
Oh, I was a little younger than that, and I had this pole also, and it's interesting because I'm almost half Scottish, so on my father's side,
I
um,
love it.
and so I really had this at a very young age. I had this knowing of just like I need to go and explore and expand. I felt like it was like leading from this heart expansion place, right, where it was just like this big like voice and heart and just this, and I was too afraid. I
Mm.
was too afraid. I was paralyzed with fear. And I'm not embarrassed to share this now. I mean, I'm far beyond those years, but I I think it's important for anyone to hear this conversation, who's hearing this conversation, because we're going to be all different ages and identities, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it's never too late to pursue that pull and that calling. Just
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't do it when you were in your 20s doesn't mean that you've missed it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And I know actually some really amazing families who have decided to uproot themselves and go and live in different countries. And I think that like we're kind of post pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and many, many families during the pandemic made the decision that they were going to make that move because
Mm-hmm.
we kind of started to understand what was important,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So, what do you think the implications would have been had you not done that? I know we can't go back and change your
Mhm.
decision. You've done what you've done, but like, what do you think from a holistic standpoint,
Oh,
what the implications would have been for you?
oh, so much. Like I I know that that leap led me to my husband. It led me to like just kind of working backwards, right? My children, my husband, being an entrepreneur. I truly think had I stayed in my hometown, I would have kind of bought into the dream, which is the American dream, the Australian dream. I think a lot of times and it's not even a dream. I think for most people, it's just the norm of society where we get a good job, we stick at our job, we gradually make our way through some ranks and whatnot, and get married, settle down, have kids, and buy a house and go on a holiday, vacation once a year, whatnot. And I think I probably would have done that. I think I would have been a teacher for life in the school system. And it wasn't until I really removed myself and came to the US and went to Scotland and then moved to the US that I started to I met different people and I started to see that there were different ways of living life. And that that was when it was 2014, the first time I really truly met some people that were entrepreneurs and their vision was freedom. And I was like, what? That's a thing? Like, what? My mind was blown, because I just thought everyone had a job, a 9 to 5, and that was just kind of how you lived life. And so, yeah, there are so many things, and I am really passionate about living in other countries and encouraging other people to do
Mm.
so. In fact, like I swear, nearly every barista that I meet, I try to tell them, I'm like, you should go if you're under 30. And I know once you're over 30, there's still ways to do it. But
Yeah.
there's a visa in Australia called a working holiday visa. It's so easy to get. And I always tell them, I'm like, you need to do this. Like it is literally a once in a lifetime opportunity and it will change your life forever. Living in another country is, I think, one of the best things that anyone could do. Traveling's one thing, but living in another country, it is life changing. And I actually, that's partly how I met my husband, was because I had this idea, and this all came through travel and through entrepreneurship. I had this vision of starting a charity called Pop the Bubble. And it literally is about taking teenagers and eventually adults, but the original vision was teenagers out of their bubble. I worked with middle school kids and I saw so many, especially in the US, a lot of them had never even left their hometown, like for even a vacation. They'd never been out of their town, let alone their state, let alone their country. And
Yeah.
even their parents, the same thing. And so I just knew, like, my first international trip, I was very blessed that when I was 16, I did go to the UK with my mom and my grandparents, because that's where she was from. And
Mm.
I believe that was what planted that seed of
Mhm.
knowing there's more out there and I can do this. And so I think
Yeah.
I think the culture in the US doesn't really encourage young people, especially, to travel. I think it's becoming more popular now, but my vision was to take teenagers to other countries. And I mean, there was a charity that I am still going to partner with that is in Guatemala, and they build bottle schools, and it's an incredible company. And my vision is to take teenagers to do that work so they can really see what, pop their bubble. Does my hair out of place really matter right
Y-
now?
Yes.
Or
Right.
not. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh my gosh. And I think that our youth are probably more ready for that now than they ever have been.
I agree.
I see even through my own children, I see who are, like adult children now,
Mm.
they're adult
Mhm.
children, but in their younger years of adulthood.
Yeah.
And I just see how they're just really choosing different pathways. It might have something to do with the fact that their mother does the same thing,
Yeah, I'm sure it
right?
does. Yeah.
But I I really love the fact that they're rewriting the way that we need to exist and be in the world.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and of course, I also want to say that if anybody is has chosen to choose a
Mm.
more traditional route of employment
Oh,
or
yeah.
not even employment, but lifestyle or life,
Mhm.
it doesn't mean it's bad or wrong. It just means, I think the most important query is to check in with yourself and say, am I at
Yes.
peace
Yes.
or am I in conflict? And many
Mhm.
times we don't realize that we are in conflict because, again, that tangibility, right? We need that tangible evidence like, well, I guess I'm not in conflict because no one's telling me that I'm in conflict, or there's no
Mm.
blood test that's telling me that I'm in conflict, or there's no, you know, um,
Mhm.
clinician that's telling me that I'm in conflict. But really, we hold the truth,
Yes.
right? We hold the truth. And so having the ability to feel safe to come into ourselves and check
Mhm.
in with ourselves and say, how am I digging this?
Yeah.
Right? Like, am I really digging this?
Right.
And am I feeling like I'm really expressing myself in a way that I want to? And
Right.
what do I need to do for myself to be able to remove those barriers to do that? Sometimes it's just
Mm.
inner work, and sometimes
Mm.
it's outer work. It's
Yeah.
really just going out and exploring and allowing
Mhm.
that exploration to help you to grow
Mhm.
your soul in other areas, right? So,
Yeah.
um, but I think we obviously we need school teachers, we need bankers,
Oh,
we need,
100%. Yeah.
all of those skilled professionals. But we also need the way showers, we need the light seekers, we need
Mhm.
um, people who are um, able to travel light
Mm.
and move through the world, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I also think like my something I'm really passionate about is helping people follow their truth, and your
Mhm.
truth might be your intuition might tell you to be a banker, and that's amazing.
Right.
Your intuition might tell you to be a teacher and to stay a teacher. Like, but the thing is that for me, my intuition led me and my truth led me to teaching, but then it led me away from it. And that was
Mhm.
okay. And
Yeah.
that's the thing I think people a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people will stay in a job, stay in a location, stay in a relationship, stay in a situation far beyond when their intuition calls them away from it.
Mhm.
And that's when that conflict arises. That's when that discomfort, the frustration, the irritation, that like there's so much this the illness, like so much that happens, I think, when we ignore that. So whatever it is, even if it's calling you to a different career, like it might be you are a teacher and now you're being called to be a banker.
Mhm.
Like that's amazing. I don't think it matters if it's calling you across the world or if it's calling you to a job down the street. It's just about that. To me is what I think, that peace, like you said, that's where you find that peace, is when you really trust and follow your intuition.
Mhm. Yes. Tell me more about the difference to go from, because I know you speak on this and you help guide and lead people through this, to go from conformity, because
Mm,
that's really what we're talking about, right?
yeah.
To
Yeah.
your authenticity. Like, what does it look like for someone
Mm,
who you work with?
yeah. I think this looks different for everyone, right? Like what your authentic self is calling, kind of what I'm talking about just now, what your authentic self is calling you to do is unique to you. And so, I think the first thing is really about identifying, am I living life on other people's terms or not? Or is this what the life I really truly want to be living? Am I making decisions based on what I want to be doing or what other people expect of me or want from me?
Right. And I think that that's such an important point, and I really want to make sure we pull that out. So, am I living my life on my own terms or someone else's terms? And that
Mhm.
goes layers deep,
Oh, yeah.
right? So what do you do? Because this happens all the time. I think this happens in
Mm,
transformation work and healing work all of the time. I call it mud on the windshield,
mm,
right? The
mhm,
inability to see. How do you
mm,
even know? Some people just don't know that they're not living life on their terms because, again, we have collective systems, we have cultural systems, we have family systems, we have relationship dynamics, we have
mm,
pressures that we kind of and responsibilities that we say yes to that we don't realize the ramifications of some of those responsibilities, which is also like living by somebody else's truth, right? So
mhm.
how I'm curious how you address that,
Mm.
um, how you help people to be able to clear the mud off the windshield, so to speak.
Yeah, I honestly, one of the best things that I think people can do is ask powerful questions of themselves. Like,
Mm,
questions are so underrated. I feel like if you could ask powerful, open-ended questions to yourself or have someone else pose them to you and journal on it, even if it's as simple as, you know, how do I make this? Do I make decisions? How do I make decisions?
right.
As
What's
simple as how do I make decisions? Like how do I come to a conclusion, whether it's a
right.
big life decision,
Mm,
what, because you'll soon discover, well, I sit down, I weigh up the pros and cons, I look at what other people, you soon realize, is it rooted in logic or is it rooted in your own intuition?
mhm,
Because it's very clear, if you have a long list of how you make your decisions, it's probably unlikely that it's coming from that authentic self and your intuition guiding you, because your default, and that's what society does, is we are taught to make decisions logically. So asking powerful questions, how do I make decisions? What would I be doing if money and time weren't an issue? Just asking open-ended questions that get you start to really think and dream. And I mean, something I believe is that it's not about finding who you are, it's remembering who you are,
yeah,
right? So
100%.
it's peeling back. I always talk about it like an onion. You want to peel back those layers of
Mhm,
the onion to get to the core of who you truly are and
mhm,
remember that. So a lot of that can be done through asking questions. I mean, obviously you're a coach, so you understand, like, working one-on-one with someone makes it easier because they can kind of call you out and be like, ask, like, dig deeper where you might just kind of brush over the surface. But talking with people as well, I think, that are living their authentic truth, because you soon start to see through other people, like, well, wow, that's how they're living their life. And you start to think about, what do I really want, and dream bigger for yourself. So
mhm.
yeah, that's one of the biggest things. And for me, tapping into your intuition is such a personal thing. Like, it's different for everyone. So it's finding what helps you tap into your intuition, whether that's being out in nature, meditating, journaling, traveling, like finding those little things that will help you tap in to your intuition. Because that's when you'll also start to see, okay, well, you'll get challenged, there'll be opportunities where people will try and make you conform, and then it's like, okay, what's my authentic self telling me to do, right? So yeah, that's the main thing for me. I'm curious what you do. You said the mud on the windshield. What do you?
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, I like to take people through a process. It's very gentle,
Mhm,
but we really, um, I look at things from the body and the mind and the spirit.
mhm,
So if we're usually very strong in one or more, but rarely in all,
mhm,
right? So the first thing we do is just take a look at where they're at, where their
mhm,
spiritual beliefs, where are they with really understanding their highest and best self. So intuition, in my definition, and the way that I have learned through embodied wisdom, as in addition to through spiritual masters and gurus and shamans and
mhm,
many different you know um, pillars in different areas of spirituality. is that our highest self is our soul's speak. So we have our highest self and we have our lower self, right? So we have the higher mind and the lower mind. And so and that comes from all aspects of the body, the mind, the spirit, right? So we are working either in our higher mind or our lower mind. We're working in our higher spirit or our lower spirit. We're working in our highest self physically or our lower self physically, right? And we can think of it in terms of vibration and energy. We can think of it in terms of, relatable conversation and words. Feel sluggish and tired and hopeless and whatever, or do you feel vital and energetic and whatever. And so through that query and discovery, we find the areas that might be a little misaligned, right? Out of alignment for them. And so I have a lot of people that come to me that want to increase their intuition. And I think it's beautiful. We're now more than ever, we're being guided to do that. And it's not just women, it's every living being that there is, right? And so once we've discovered areas where we might be strong in and areas where we might need to give more love to and energy to, then we start to detox those areas, all of them, right? So physical body, mental, brain, right? The brain and the mind, as well as the spiritual aspect. So the spiritual aspect is very interesting for me because from a spiritual lens, love is truth. Truth is love, right? But we are all shedding, every single one of us, the layers that create the mud on the windshield for us, right? As far as like, what is really the truth? I think we've even, in the pandemic, the first year of the pandemic, the first couple of months, one of the things that happened through kind of the planet Uranus being, direct at that time, and Uranus is known as the great expander, right? Kind of the one that digs up all of the dirt and brings the skeletons that are buried in the soil to the surface, right? So we had a lot of cultural uproars. We had a lot of global uproars because we were discovering that what we were taught wasn't true about our history and about our people. And we literally were like, we've been connecting with people based upon this stuff that we were taught was true, but it wasn't. And now we're feeling like raw. All of us were feeling raw, right? So from that spiritual lens, I guess I like to have us just not question our faith, but question the way that we're receiving our faith. And that if we need to detoxify a little bit from that, right? And really just align ourselves with people who are more with the truth of our highest power, as opposed to the truth of the individual who's in front of us, who's creating these rules for some sort of consumeristic benefit. Right. So that's the beginning of that beautiful, rhythmic discovery of your intuition, which is basically your truth of your highest and best self. And that can take lifetimes for some people.
It can, because it takes a lot of courage. I really think to embark on that journey takes a lot of courage, and to actually, the thing that I find a lot of times when it comes to people finding their intuition is people can often identify times where they've been in tune with their intuition and they've heard it, but they've ignored it, right? How many times have we done that? I know before I met my husband, that was kind of how you were saying, the different, the mind, the body, and the soul, and how often we have strength in certain areas. Something I find as well, which I'm sure you find with your clients, is often where we can be quite intuitive and follow our truth in some areas of our lives, but not others. And that was what I identified when I was back in Australia, because I was very good at following my intuition. Like I literally moved to the US based on my intuition. Like, I was in Scotland and my intuition told me to move to the US. I was stone broke. I had no visa, no job, no car, no house, zero logical reason to do so. But I was like, that was the first time in my life that I made a decision based out of my intuition rather than logic. And it was so magical. Like, it was incredible. But again, my default, kind of what you're talking about, with the people that you have those conversations with that are going to speak to your higher self or your lower self, past Cara would have conversations like at that point when I was trying to make a decision, because I was back in Scotland, like, what am I going to do? And I called all of my family and friends who I still love and adore, but all of them were used to speaking to my lower self. And they're like, well, you should just stay there, save some money, get a job lined up, then go to the US, very logical. And I was like, but my intuition is and no one got it.
Yeah.
And I had to I took myself out in nature. I went on a hike, and I remember it was one of those journeys that I went on. And it was such an important moment for me, because I didn't know where I was going. I just in that moment, just found my way to the top of this mountain and sat at the top and looked down and saw all of the thousand different paths I could have taken to get there. And I was like, that's my life. I just have to follow my gut and I'll find where I need to go. And I ended up going back to my great uncle and was like, I have to go. And he said to me, I know you do. I'm going to pay for your ticket.
Oh.
And I was like, I couldn't have, again, because I trusted that inner guidance system and was ready to take a leap of faith and be courageous. Incredible things happened. But and that's where it's scary, because usually it doesn't make any sense. And that it makes zero sense.
It goes against all reason.
Exactly.
It goes against all reason. I mean, people say that to me all the time. They're just like, it's just not. And I'm like,
doesn't make sense. Yeah. You're like, that's how you know it probably is what you need to do. Exactly. And that's it. I talk about flexing your courage muscle, because that's what it is. You have to keep being courageous and take these leaps of faith, which are scary. But when you are doing it from a space of that higher self, it really does. It's magical. I don't know how else to explain it, but what happens is it's just beautiful.
I'm a very sensory person, right? So I literally feel these things, and I taste these things, and I can see these things, and I can and so when for myself, when I take that step towards a greater alignment of self and selfhood and selfness and love, it's like, it's scary. And there's all these little gremlins that start to talk to you and tell you all of these things about yourself that are true, right? You're gonna die, right? You're gonna starve. And I just say, but what do I really need? And when I surrender to that and surrender to less, I always get more.
Yeah.
And I feel like I just kind of fit into this hum of the universe. And when you're in the hum of the universe, you're no longer thinking about yourself. You're feeling the infinite. You're feeling the infinite, period. Right. And some of us are there and able to be there for extended periods of time, or even from one point for the rest of our lives. And others get to feel that feeling a few times in their lifetime. But every single time it's worth it to take that chance on yourself, because you're worth it. And I also think that when we take that step like you did, we always get steps laid out in front of us. And I say this all the time, that we live in that tangible aspect, right? Let's just say that our lives are 100%, like 360, 100%, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all are designed to live in survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
All of us. And
Mm-hmm.
survival mode only lives in the 1% of the 100%,
Mm.
right? So 99% of our 360 experience that is here for us
Yeah.
isn't what we know,
Yeah.
right? So in order for us to get into that 360 experience, that 100%, right? It
Mm.
doesn't mean we have to abandon the 1% that we know. It
No.
means we get more.
Mm-hmm.
And we also get to meter, sort of, but not really. We get to meter like how much. It's not like a fire hose, right? So it's just like we go
Right.
from 1%, now it's like 99%. Oh my God, right? Like
Yes.
something out of a plane. But like it's, you get to meter it a little bit. You give yourself grace. You allow yourself to metabolize. You allow
Mm-hmm.
yourself to come back to your own personal safety and just check all of those things out. And following your intuition isn't about being right or perfect.
No.
I'm sure that there were not every step went
Oh,
smoothly for you.
no. Absolutely. And that's absolutely a misconception. I think
Yeah.
people, think, well, it should be perfect when I do that then because I took that courageous leap of faith. Like, no, but
No.
it's about the peace that you have even when it's challenging.
Yeah.
Like that was the thing for me that was such a, oh gosh, like such a revelation when I first moved here. And yeah, there was so many challenges, but it was also, there was so many incredible things that were happening simultaneously. But
Mm,
man, I told you I was broke when I moved here. And so I was like, I had to fly home to get my visa. Like, so there was so many challenges, right? Quote unquote challenges, but because it was aligned, it didn't feel, I mean, it was still hard, but
mm.
I knew I could do it, and you just have you what is it? Choose your hard. It's going to be hard no matter. Life is going to be hard. There's going to be challenges, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
do you want it to be something that is exciting and something that feels aligned, or do you want it to be something that is boring that you don't enjoy, and that just makes you feel like you're constantly living in frustration? So that was, yeah, I think it's really important to know that, because I have people that say, well, I followed my intuition once and it did me wrong. It did this, it did that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, did it really though? Maybe it was stopping you from something even worse. Maybe there was something else that you avoided by being
Mhm.
on that. It's the path of least resistance, not the path of no resistance, right? It's gonna be resistance.
Yeah. And sometimes we find our path by greeting the resistance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Just like, what am I
exactly.
feeling resistant to? I have a beautiful friend who I met on Instagram, and she's from Abu Dhabi, and she read my book. She started reading my book, and she said, I started feeling such resistance after I got through the first couple chapters.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, so I knew that that meant that I had to read the book.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, cue the tears, cue the journaling, cue the questions, cue the thing. She said, I felt healed after I
Mm-hmm.
finished reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's really where we find our fear points. And I'm not saying do things scared and make yourself feel abandoned or
Yeah.
that, but I think it's important for us to be kind and gentle and loving and help to coax our younger selves that are guiding us. Those are the
Mm-hmm.
protective mechanisms that are in place, right? All of those fractured parts of our younger selves that are just like, you haven't kept me safe yet, right? Or what the heck do you think you're doing going to the United
Mhm.
States, right?
Right. Yeah.
Go
Yes.
and buy another cardigan sweater and go back
Right.
to that classroom, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And, it's funny you say that because it makes me think of Sam, actually, Samantha Joy. One thing that she said to me one time that I was like, man, that hits home is we were talking about self-sabotage, right? And she was saying self-sabotage isn't a thing, it's self-preservation. You are, because all it is you're scared. Your inner self, your inner child is trying to protect you. And so you quote unquote sabotage that situation, or because you were trying to protect yourself. And I'm like, yeah, that's 100% true. And that's, to me, that's what that fear is, right? Because whenever you're going to take that leap, I mean, I have this formula, like find, free, and follow, right? So you find your intuition, you tap in, and then you free your mind of those like fears, the limitations, the frustrations, the insecurities. So, and although it's free, you're never going to be fully free of fear, right? Like
Right.
it's just, it's a part of who we are. It's coming to peace with that part and learning to move through the fear and the limitations, right? And then follow is when you actually do that leap of faith. You actually have the courage to follow it. And like you said, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to abandon yourself, and it can be baby steps. You do this in small, start with small things that you feel ready to do, and then gradually move to the bigger things if you need to. Like, I mean, I dove into the deep end when I did it, because it was the first time I followed my truth, and it took me across the country. So, I mean, do whatever's right for you.
I totally get that. I totally get that. Yeah, exactly. You just follow your own truth, greet your own swerve, right? And just let it go.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing is to take action on it on some level,
Yes.
and not be afraid of it being the wrong thing, or being, having some sort of negative consequence for whatever it is. It's when you follow your highest self and your guidance, you're greeting the parts of your life and their growth opportunities, so that you can gain the wisdom that you need to be able to do the things that you want to do. And when we're entrepreneurs, I mean, I think that like it's a constant evolution of self, right?
Yeah.
Failing is part of success. And so if you're not failing on some level, then you're really not successful. Right? So I give the example of McDonald's, right? So when McDonald's first came out, they were making a killing selling a Coke, French fries, and a cheeseburger, right? Now, if McDonald's didn't take risks and come up with like the McFlurry and leprechaun shake and like, the McRib, right? That anybody, those were not all of them were successes, right? But they continue to evolve the brand. If they didn't do that and they still just had the Coke, the French fries, and the cheeseburger, they would have been swallowed up whole.
Right.
But now they're like one of the number one franchises in the world, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So McDonald's is a wonderful way, and I'm not saying that, from a health standpoint, but I'm saying like from a business standpoint, right? That like they're a wonderful model to think about, right? Just to choose to try and invest in kind of the engineering behind it, however that is, like that inner engineering of yourself. Take the risk, and then if it doesn't work, be like, okay,
right,
you'll learn some, right? Like, this is life. We don't have to take it so seriously. Not everything is life or death. And that's where that like 1% survival mode comes in, right?
Exactly.
We feel like everything is life or death because we're in that survival mode all the time, which is basically just to keep us alive, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
I love that.
Talk to me about I just am loving this conversation so much. I can't wait to spend more time with you. Like
me too. I know, like
but I want to know about, I know that you talk a lot about boundaries and how important they are. Like, can you share more about that, Cara?
Gosh, yeah. Boundaries. This is something that I know I struggled with for the longest time. And it's something I'm still on a journey with. I think as girls, especially as females, we grow up being taught. And I think people pleasing and boundaries go hand in hand.
Oh, yes.
So
yes.
I like 100%, they go hand in hand. And I think as little girls, we're taught, be kind, be nice, and that which is important for sure. You want to be kind to yourself and others, but you also still, that I think the piece that we miss when we're growing up, that I don't know whether we just don't learn it often or it's not taught explicitly, but the kindness to self is what we suppress because we want to do everything to keep everyone else happy. And that's why we don't set boundaries. We become a yes woman, right? Yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll, and that was me 100%. I was thinking about this the other day, people pleasing, there's nothing wrong with wanting to please other people.
Yeah.
Right. There's, of course, like, do I want to do a great job today? Because I want, to please you. Of course. Like, yeah, like but there's nothing wrong with that because it's still in alignment with what I desire. The problem with people pleasing is a lot of the times we push our own desires, needs, wants aside for someone else's desires, wants, and needs, right? And that's where you have to set boundaries, right? And it starts, I do think this is a muscle as well. I think it's something that and sometimes, oh my gosh, I recently had a situation where I looked back and was like, oh my gosh, I missed an opportunity to set a boundary. And because it was and the reason why I say that is because it ended up having a ripple effect, a negative ripple effect on myself and my family. And because of the people, it was partly people pleaser, partly the situation, right, was wrapped up in a different way to what I was used to. I feel like in my personal life, in my life, I've become quite good at setting boundaries, and it started small. I had to start with, if someone asked me to go out and do something with them and I had plans that day, I had to just start practicing saying, I can't do it right now, but I can do it tomorrow. Or, just being able to say no is a skill, and it is a really challenging skill for some people. So it just baby steps, be gentle with yourself is something that I think is really important as a female, because and I remind people, you can be kind and loving and generous and still have boundaries. Right? You can be simultaneously both, because I think people have this vision and this image in their mind of, if you have boundaries, you're going to be a bitch. Like, you're just a horrible person because you don't care about anyone else but yourself. That couldn't be further from the truth. The thing is, you care about yourself and others. And so it's about being able to decipher, what is it I need right now? And actually and that's tuning into yourself, right? What do I need right now? And is, this request from someone else, whatever it might be, the situation, like I was talking about, it was one of my husband's friends that came and was staying with us. And there was lots of layers to the situation, right? And because it wasn't one of my friends, had it been one of my friends, would have been a different situation, totally. And being able to set a boundary in place would have been probably not a problem, because it would have been my friend and it would have been fine. But it turned out that I let this person push our boundaries, push into our world too much. And it had a pretty bad ripple effect.
Ooh.
And that's when you are reminded of, okay, that was an opportunity for me to set a boundary and have a hard conversation. Like, that's really what about boundary setting, why most people don't set boundaries, is because it requires a hard conversation. And that was what was needed. But this person was also deflective, like would not stand still to have a conversation, would walk off mid, so it was a very challenging situation. But again, a reminder of, especially your personal space, you've got to be so intentional about who you allow in.
Yeah.
And especially with kids, who you allow in and who you close the door to, and who you set, even if it's like, okay, you can be here. And I ended up setting a boundary after the fact, and it pushed that person completely away.
Oh, well,
so I was like, okay,
exactly.
Okay.
I
got that cord.
Yeah. So that just provides more wisdom.
It does.
Right.
And I think that's the grace part. You have to give yourself grace, because like I said, this is something I've been practicing for years. I mean, my people pleasing and boundary setting journey began when I first started following my truth. And that was over a decade ago, where I really intentionally started doing all this. And then you're going to be provided opportunities along the way where, you may or may not do what you know was the best thing to do in that moment. And it's giving yourself grace with that and knowing like, okay.
Yeah.
Again, wisdom.
Right. Exactly. I think about, in my work, it just kind of has blossomed into this intergenerational healing within family systems. And so beautiful. And so usually what ends up happening is like I start working with one family member and then another family member needs assistance. And this one particular family, the adult daughter has been on a healing journey for years, and was working with me. And then just the mother started working with me like 6 months ago. And what came out in a conversation was that this daughter, who is now also a parent of a young child, has been holding resentment for her entire life because she was forced to have to hug people. And she never liked hugs, ever. And so part of the conversation was, I have to tell you my truth.
Yes.
And the truth was, I don't like hugs.
Yeah.
For very few people do I enjoy hugs. And when I do, it's got to be very much on my terms. And I don't want to hug. And but the interesting thing is that the story that the mother had said, and it was very hard for the mother to receive this, right? Well, what are you talking about? Because like you were known as like the family's greatest hugger, and hugs are a sign of love, and hugs are this and hugs are that. And my client was like, and I never felt safe.
Yeah. Yep.
And so the thing is that, like, to kind of speak into the boundary setting, it takes as long as it takes in your healing for you to be able to get to the point where you can understand where some of your emotion, like your uncomfortable emotions and some of your behaviors are stemming from. And many times it's not because we're adults or we're like sovereign beings, like in complete control of our thoughts and our decision making and all that stuff. Many people who are placed in our caregiver roles are of the best of intention, but they're not necessarily helping you to learn what it's like to honor your truth. Right?
Exactly. Yes.
So there's nothing wrong or at fault with that situation, other
Right.
than the fact that it took 30 years for this person to actually allow themselves to release the poison that they had inside their bodies because they were feeling resentment for 30 years.
Right.
And didn't know what
To
it was.
articulate that. Yeah.
Right. So a boundary is, for me, it's based on what your standards are. Right. So you have your children,
Yes.
you have your family. It's very clear that you and your husband have a very specific standard of the way that you want to raise your children and the way that you want to live and be in the world and exist in the world, and what you're putting out in the world and all of that stuff, and what you're receiving in from the world. And so I think where people find it hardest to have a boundary is when they've been such a people pleaser that they have no standards whatsoever. They have no needs.
Yes.
Right. So from the trauma lens, and I'm, that's where I kind of come from, right? The trauma lens of many people who have experienced really heavy and hard and challenging traumatic things in their lives are programmed to believe that they don't have any needs.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
So I also want to have a deep appreciation for people who are starting at that point.
Yes.
So the journey to be able to get to the boundary, like, don't feel bad if you're having a hard time establishing a boundary.
Oh.
Boundaries are verbs. Boundaries are actionable. Boundaries
Mhm.
aren't having you and I having the conversation with, okay, Cara, listen, like I really don't like the word um Skittles. So in our conversations, could you please not use the word Skittles?
Right.
Right. And then you're talking and going off and you're in flow and you're just like in Skittles, right? I'm not going to say like, oh, you crossed a boundary,
Right.
because the boundary needs to be asserted.
Yes.
And which is just like, um, I had informed you what my standard was, and I just don't really like the word Skittles. And I understand it's just part of your vocabulary. I just want to let you know when it's spoken, it just makes me feel really uncomfortable. And I'm probably just gonna peace out,
Right. Right.
right? So many people feel like they wait until they have this like volcanic eruption of emotion to
Hmm.
actually establish the boundary because they're so uncomfortable. And then that's what dictates the boundary, which is what makes boundaries so hard, right? Because we
Yes.
don't want to be volcanically erupting emotionally all of the time.
Yes.
So I love the fact that you kind of blend in the fact that people pleasing and
Mm.
boundaries go hand in hand. So if you do find yourself in the audience, I'm sure there are people that are listening, like literally taking notes right now. And so I think if you find yourself in a situation where you are constantly feeling offended or disrespected or abandoned,
Taken advantage
heard,
of.
or
Yeah.
taken advantage of, I think it's a matter of re-engineering what your understanding is of a boundary,
Hmm.
and understanding that if you're not comfortable really establishing that boundary yet, then let's go back to what your beliefs are on your standards,
Hmm.
your own life,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
And then from there, they just organically flow then into boundaries,
Yes. It
right?
does. Yeah.
So yeah,
100%. And I think it's all interconnected as well, like you said, with following your truth and being able to speak your truth.
yeah,
Because it's so interesting the story you were telling of the girl, because I actually met someone at this birthday party a little while back, and it was her mom and daughter, same sort of thing, a mom and daughter. And the daughter was an adult. She was in her early 20s. And we were talking about my son and the daughter and how they're kind of similar. Like my son he's a little like, ever since the day he was born, he wasn't one of those kids of straight away like smiley and like we'll just go to people. He would mean mug you. He would look at people. He didn't care. Like, and if he didn't like you, he wasn't going to pretend. And he wasn't about to go and like just make friends with anyone. Like he was quite standoffish until he felt comfortable, right?
yeah,
And we allowed that to be the case. And I remember this lady saying, "Oh, it reminds me of my daughter when she was younger." She said, "I'll never forget. There was this one guy at church that, she never wanted to hug. She would refuse to hug him. And I always was so embarrassed." She said, "I would be like, you can't do that. You got to be kind. You got to give him a hug or whatever." And she said, and to this day, the girl still, same thing, doesn't like hugs. And she said, and I had said to her, like, that's amazing because that was her intuition telling her, not turned out this guy was a pedophile, right? They find out down years later. But the thing is, her intuition was telling her, truth was
yeah.
telling her, don't hug this person.
Mhm.
But she was being pushed by society because the mum felt uncomfortable that no, 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 you got to be nice. You got to give this man a hug, right? Or give him a high five or something. And I think as parents, it's important. It really is so important that we find space for that for ourselves,
Mhm.
because and again, it can show up. It can show those challenge or the situations, the trauma that we have from growing up that's created this belief of no, no, you have to be nice, you have to be kind, whatever it is. And being able to even though we have our own baggage, to be able to hold that space for our children so they don't pick up on the same. I mean, parenting's a whole nother element, right? It's a
Oh, yeah.
whole nother aspect
You're
of
going to come
healing.
back and we're going to
Like,
talk about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it. But yeah, I think following your truth and being
Yeah.
able to follow your truth is an important part of people pleasing and boundary setting. Like they're
Yeah.
all so interconnected. But yeah, I love everything you said there.
Yeah. And you, it's the same. I mean, you're just such a shining example of really organically finding yourself to that truth and allowing the
Mhm.
process to unfold in a very kind of not like, like in a messy action kind of a way, in a
Yeah.
perfectly imperfect way. Right. which is, it goes against the way that many of our ancestors thought that, all of the efforts that they provided or that they gave to provide us with the opportunities to have what we have, to have an easier life doesn't necessarily, it doesn't always align, right?
Yeah.
And so it is hard. It is really hard. It is
Yeah.
hard. I want to acknowledge that it's not,
Oh, it is.
it's hard in ways that, we all have our own hard and our own resistance to pain on certain levels, right? But the hard that we're encountering and confronting is like trying to greet a tsunamic wave
Yeah.
of 7 generations of thousands of people in our ancestry, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
whenever you make that move, like I love the fact that you speak of courageousness, right? Because it
Mhm.
is so courageous.
Mhm.
It is absolutely courageous to anytime honor yourself,
Mhm. Yes.
to really honor your own path. So Cara Kelley, you have been so wonderful. This has been such a magical conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
I did so much. I really did.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm sure that our community is absolutely going to love, 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 love finding you. And so I'm going to put all of your ways to connect in the show notes.
Mhm.
But is there anything that you'd like to leave us with before we end today?
Oh, goodness. I mean, it's just been so wonderful to chat with you. I think we could chat for hours.
Yeah.
But I think I'm trying to think if there's one last thing. I think, the biggest thing is be gentle with yourself on this journey.
Mm,
Because it really, like I said, it doesn't matter how many years you have been on this journey, on this physical plane, in this physical body, there are, and I was listening to Jamie McFadden and you speaking previously, and there are waves. It is a roller coaster, and you will sometimes be frustrated with yourself. You'll slip off, but just be very gentle with yourself. Keep coming back to yourself and those practices that help you tune into yourself.
mm.
Finding those practices that work for you when you're going through hard times is the biggest blessing, to be able to come back to those. So
Sage advice.
yeah.
Words of true embodied wisdom. I can tell you're speaking from a true embodied experience of that.
Mm.
So that really lands well. And so thank you so much. And Cara, I again hope that people will connect with Cara on social media. We connected on Instagram and also again, as we said, through Samantha Joy. And also, if you're just finding me here on this channel, click the link below and join our community so that I can keep you updated on speaking engagements, book talks, lots of different stuff that I like to share, wisdom with our community, and of course, all of the podcasts and lives that I do with our community. So thank you, everybody. And until the next time, peace and love, and be gentle with yourself.